Hi, James Fogarty, Executive Director of A Plus Schools. Just very grateful to you all for being here. We will get started in just a moment, but first I'd like to introduce and welcome our board chair, Dr. Sarah Silverman. She has been with us for the last 6 years, 5 of them as our board chair, has been my partner in this work in trying to transform what A Plus Schools is and what we do and how we focus on students and families as the real core of our mission. And so I just wanted to introduce Dr. Silverman and welcome her up to welcome you to this beginning of our report to the community. Graham, can I ask you one favor? Can you come up and just make sure that the all the computer things that are going on in Zoom? Thank you. Before we get started.
Thank you, Bear. Good morning, everyone. And for those of you online that I can't see, good morning to you too. It's so nice to actually see people in person after a few years of not so many people in person. I'm very glad that you're here. James, thank you to you and to your team for all the things that you do to put together the annual report to the community. It's very much a pleasure and an honor to welcome people and to share this with you. As James mentioned, since A Plus's inception, we've learned a few lessons. We started A Plus with the idea that access to data and information about the quality of our schools and how they're performing is a right that every child and family has. But our approach has evolved a bit. We started by looking at academic outcomes that we know matter, and we continue to remain dedicated to those academic outcomes. But then we started looking at some of the other drivers, some of the keys to get students to school and help them learn effectively. And in recent years, that's evolved even further. As James shared, it's not enough to simply measure what's going on in schools. We also need to dig in and figure out what we can do to help. And that's where hopefully all of you come in. Many of you have already been doing many things to help. But we hope that the report helps draw your energy and attention to some of the things that we think matter most. And in particular, we're looking forward to telling the story of what we've learned about attendance and literacy over the last couple of years. I won't let too much out of the bag, but I just want to echo James's gratitude to all of you for participating in this conversation. I hope that you take a lot out of it. If you have any questions for me or for James, we'll have plenty of time for that. But I hope that you'll really push us and you'll help us continue to think and evolve over the next couple of years as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you again. So Sarah, this year will be rolling off the board after 6 years, and Gita has a little token of our appreciation for you, Sarah, for all that you've done. We are excited to keep our existing members of the board. Nonprofit organizations can't do the work without strong and dedicated board members who set the vision, who help raise the funds, and who provide support and direction for all of us. So Sarah, thank you so much. And we want to announce that we're adding a couple of board members, some faces that you know. Diana Brugo, who's been on our board, will now be our board chair in the coming year in 2024. Bill Eisler, former board president of PBS and the former CEO of the Fred Rogers Company, will be joining us. And Jesse Exelis, a parent and deputy city solicitor for the city of Pittsburgh, will be joining us as well. So we're very excited about our board and thankful to the board members that will continue with us in the coming year. If you're ever interested in joining our board or interested in board service or advisory board service, please do let us know. We're always looking for talented folks who can help us raise the resources we need to support children and families getting to school every day. All right, so today's agenda, let's go through this quickly. So we'll start with what's in the report, give you a little overview of highlights of what's in there. And we'll do a little overview of where A Plus Schools is and where we're going with this focus on getting every kid in every school every day. We'll follow that up with some key takeaways from the 2023 reports to the community with a focus on 3 big questions. Are kids getting to school? Are kids getting there ready to learn? And are kids wanting to be there and feel they belong? And we'll try and answer that from a variety of perspectives based on the data that we have. Then we are lucky to have both Dr. Wayne Walters and William Hileman, the new president of PFT. Not yet. The presumptive presumptive president, incoming president of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, to join us today to share their reflections, and then we'll close out. Does that sound good? Okay. So let's take a minute to figure out what's inside this report this year, right? So we, as we've been doing for the past few years, highlight a few bright spots about what's working in our schools. We do this as part of our executive summary as a way to show, where we might be able to focus our attention to learn, right? Again, as an organization, we're really focused on learning so that we can get better at what we do to support schools, families, and students get what they need. The other thing we have again this year are rising up stories. This year are rising up stories look at best practices in reading, relationship building and counseling, algebra in 8th grade, and community resources in our libraries and trade unions. And I want to thank Lance Harrow from the Master Builders Association for his support of our work and for providing us with an interview as part of the Rising Up Stories. We also do some systems analysis, right, where we take a look through our executive summary at data district-wide through an equity lens. And then finally, at least on this page, we look at some school information, providing information on each public school in Pittsburgh, both district and charter schools, and we provide information around enrollment, demographic data, achievement information, and special education services. Additionally, we provide a whole section of community resources, our sponsors, who I will be thanking here in a moment. I have a set of resources. We provide phone numbers, websites, and program information, all in one section in the book now this year. It used to be interspersed, but we want to make it a little easier for families to take a look. So check out the community resources section. We provide facts at a glance, right? Kind of high level what we see as key indicators for the district on one page. So we hope that that's helpful to you. We also provide information about PBS's early childhood centers. We got feedback that for families that were 0 to 5, they were trying to figure out where might I send my child for early childhood education, right? And PBS has a great network of both school-based sites, their own centers, and then partnership sites. And so we provided a map this year, and we encourage folks to use Trying Together site to find information on childcare if you need it. The other thing we did this year, because it's somewhat recent, though it's not brand new, is we provided an overview of Act 158, which is the new graduation, new-ish, right? It's a couple years old now. Graduation requirements. This provides an overview of the 5 different pathways that students have to graduation. We do this in the hopes that it starts to spur conversation with families and schools, especially high school students who are thinking about, okay, what do I need to have next, and what does the state require me to do in order to be able to graduate? We take a deeper dive into what the education partnerships resources are, and we do this because we know that there are many partnership schools within PBS, and we want to encourage our teachers and faculty to take advantage of the resources that they have in their warehouse, right? From school supplies to shirts to clothes. I mean, Education Partnership is doing more than just school supplies these days, and so we do a little overview of their programs. We have a page that has tips for parents, right, to help you think about how you can set up study spaces and support your student, right, because we know trying to do homework help is not always easy as a parent, I will attest to that. And finally, I just want to thank our student artists. We have some great art. I don't know if you love this cover as much as I do, but Mariah H, as a student at Alderdice, painted that as part of her work as an artist at Alderdice, and we were lucky enough to be able to get her permission to be able to use it on our front cover. On the back cover, the whimsical picture of frogs in the tub is by Hannah P, a Kappa student. And finally, a pre-K student is on our inside cover from Langley, Miala W. Her work, her self-portrait is in the inside cover. So I want to thank our student artists and remind all of you that arts are a big part of what make a great education and what help children want to come to school. Finally, I'm going to do some thanks here real quick. We can't do this work without the generous funders, sponsors, and individuals who make our work possible. These are our key funders, right? So I want to thank the United Way, Colley Ministries, McElhatton Foundation. Gina, thank you for being here. Richard K. Mellon Foundation, the Buell Foundation. I see Diana and the staff from Buell. Thank you for being here and your support. The Grable Foundation, Pittsburgh Foundation, and Highmark AHM. In addition to these great funders, we were blessed with over 200 individuals and other organizations support our work in the past year. So we're really grateful to all that support. And then finally, my thanks to those who supported in my Gita, my publications director, invited me to make sure I give time to all of my sponsors in an even way this year. We want to make sure we thank our sponsors who provided monetary support. This monetary support allows us to print and publish this book and send it out to 15,000 families. These folks helped underwrite that publication and make sure that folks in our community, whether it be legislative office, magistrate, or district office, this book in print. We've talked about, should we just go to online? And I hear from parents and community organizations and others every year, don't do that. So we need the sponsorship support to be able to continue to print, publish, and mail this report. And so we're very grateful to these generous sponsors. Finally, there are the folks who helped put this book together, the A+ Schools team and the folks from PBS and Charters. So first, we want to thank Faith Shantz, who is our editor and writer. I know she's on her way here. She's been doing this since 2004 for us at A+ Schools. Her institutional knowledge and understanding of issues makes this report come alive every year, and we are just so grateful to continue to be able to work with her. I also want to thank Sean Caulfield, who's our lead data analyst, who does this part-time from his new home in Denver, Colorado. Andrea Peklinicki from 232 Design, who led the design and charting this year, really made the process a lot easier for our team. Alec Harkins, who's our data analyst, who again, part-time, makes sure that the data that we have in here is accurate and correct. And finally, Gita Mitchell on our team, who's our project lead on the report to the community. Honestly, she's the one that does all of the work to make sure that this comes together. So I just want to thank her from our team. At PBS, I can't thank Dr. Walters enough for his support of transparent and open information about our schools. The team, Andrea, Dr. Ted Dwyer, Sarah Stefanik, Stephen Green, Eric Shepard, these folks are amazing, right? So if you have a data question working through PBS, you're welcome. I think we're very lucky to have the team that is there, because they were able to answer questions for us. We were able to pose questions to them. And this kind of relationship back and forth allows us to make sure that the data is accurate and complete. I want to thank Ebony for reviewing this and making sure that the stories in it were accurate. And then the teams from all of the charter schools who provided us information, and the teachers, students, and organization folks who helped give us interviews for our Rising Up stories. We thank you as well. All right, with that, let's talk a little bit about A+ Schools' journey forward. As Sarah mentioned, right? She talked about this evolving mission, and since our inception, right, we've been constantly trying to meet the needs as best we saw them to improve educational outcomes for students. From our initial focus on transparency and governance, to organizing, to building partnerships, to our current focus on problem solving and continuous improvement, at the heart of our work is within this question: what can we do as an organization and as a community to help kids learn what they need to thrive? We believe now more than ever that solving the problems related to whether a kid is in school or not is critical to making that happen. And I hope by the end of this report, you too are with us in this mission to get every kid into every school every day. Because for us, when our city is able to say that every child is in every school every day, then we'll know our children and families have what they need to thrive. And one measure of thriving is how much are students able to earn in the workforce. It's not the only measure, but it is one. And data from the census of 2021 shows the difference in annual income between someone who doesn't graduate from high school and someone who has a bachelor's degree is approximately $30,000 a year. No matter when you get that post-secondary education, it does matter your lifelong ability to buy a home, help your kids go to college, provide the enriching experiences like travel and arts that make life worth living, right? And so we know if we want our children to thrive and our families to thrive, that they need that kind of economic power. We know that post-secondary training, right, again, is necessary to be able to thrive. And based on what we know from the National Student Clearinghouse, which tracks students once they leave PBS to see if they've completed college or trade school, about 24% of the 1,653 students that started high school in PBS in 2013 have gone on to complete college or trade school by 2023. If we want these young folks to thrive, we know that we're going to have to, as a community, find pathways for the 76% that we don't know, right? We don't know if they completed college or trade school in another fashion. We just don't know. But if we want them to thrive, we're going to have to be able to make sure that they have the training and skills necessary for them to be able to find life-sustaining jobs. This starts, right? If we're going to really move this number, this starts with us making sure every student is in school every day. We also know that, for the first time, we see, 84% of PBS students are graduating on time in 2022, and Black graduation rates were the highest they've ever been at 81%, right? So in terms of that first marker, right, making sure that folks are graduating, we're seeing huge increases in that, right? Again, this data lags a year, so this is 2022 data. So we'll see what continues to happen, but our hope is that we continue to see rising graduation rates. But we also know, and the district is part of this, PBS is part of a growing number of school districts that use the National College and Career Readiness Indicators that AASA, the Superintendent's Association, has put out to gauge whether those that graduate are indeed ready for the next step. These evidence-based indicators help us know whether a student will likely be successful. It's not certain, but likely, greater probability will be successful in college, career, and life. According to their site, Redefining Ready, students are considered college ready if they have a 2.8 GPA and one or more of the listed academic indicators, or meeting the standardized testing benchmarks listed here under the SAT, ACT, or college readiness placement scales. So what do we know about Pittsburgh students and their readiness, right? Well, this year we know, in the first graph you can see, the light blue part of each bar represents the number of PBS seniors who had a grade point average of 2.8 or higher, right? To the right of that, we know that 495 students scored a 3 or higher on an AP exam. Based on just GPA and AP scores, we might expect around 500 of the graduating seniors in the class of 2023 to go on and be successful in college and career, right? Again, there are a lot of other factors, but just based on these evidence-based indicators, you might expect that. The other indicator, right, is which students are meeting the SAT benchmarks, right? So in 2023, 830 students met the SAT reading benchmark and 508 met the SAT math benchmark. Again, if we're looking at that as an indicator of who's ready, we might say that about 500 students are likely to be successful in college coming out of high school with their PBS. Again, that's based on the indicators that Redefining Ready sets out. But in order for all of that to happen, everyday attendance matters a lot. If we want more students to graduate ready, we know from national data that they have to get there every day. Data out of Ohio, which is what's on the slide here, show that students who regularly attend school, again, i.e. don't miss more than 10% of school days, are 6.7 times more likely to read at grade level by third grade, and 9 times more likely to graduate from high school on time and go on to college and career. Which is great, which is what we want. And in PBS, we know that 82% of the proficient third grade readers were not chronically absent, right? Say that again, 82% of the kids that were reading at grade level by third grade were not chronically absent in third grade last year. It's so important if we want our children to succeed for them to be there every day. So what are we doing? Again, if we want every kid to thrive, it starts with them being in school. What we're doing is coordinating and mobilizing this community's resources so that every kid has an excuse to go to school every day. We work with partners to focus on evidence-based strategies and in partnership, right? Co-designing with schools, families, and students, and community organizations, initiatives and interventions that help get every kid to show up to school, help get every kid showing up ready to learn, and help get every kid a school where they want to be and feel they belong. We'll know we're successful when no child is chronically absent in Pittsburgh. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, a doctor, a librarian, an out-of-school time worker, a bus driver, or just a caring adult in our community, all of us have a role to play to help get kids to school every day. The problems that we'll solve along the way to that goal of zero chronic absence will help change the trajectory of our city. And I mean this, will help change the trajectory of our city and our region and put more families on a path to thrive. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it. And by using the data here as a source of light, not heat, we can work together with our partners at the schools, at the district, and in our community to ensure that our kids are getting there. So now I'm going to invite you to learn what we've learned about chronic absence and how this community, based on the data we've reviewed and analyzed in this report, is doing at these three things: getting every kid to school, getting every kid to school ready to learn, getting every kid to school where they want to be, feel they belong. I'll repeat these things over and over again until we're all on board with that message, right? Before I begin though, I want to note that our methodology for calculating chronic absence has changed this year. From last, to be more in line with both district methodologies that comes from the state's Every Student Succeeds Act plan, right? Federal law, Every Student Succeeds Act, passed in late 2019, 2020. Under that plan, the state had to define what chronic absence was. And so the way the state defined it meant that there were really two changes in how we define chronic absence for our readers, okay? In past years, we looked at the number of students who missed 10% or more school days, period, right? So 10% or more. The way the state defines it is more than 10%. Slight difference, but the difference in a 180 school day here is that it's the difference between if someone missed 18 days versus 19 days, right? It's, the state definition is 19 days or more in a 180 school day here. You with me? Following along? Okay, there's a second change. This year, again, to align with state definitions, we only count students if they had 90 days or more enrollment at any given school. Again, under the law, many schools would rightly, I think, push back and say, look, how can we be held responsible for chronic absence data if the student was only there for 30 days? Give us 3 months, let that be the time frame by which we should be judged. The state said, fine. What we used to do is just count any student, no matter how long they were enrolled in the school, whether or not they were there. Again, comparisons between our data this year then and last year are going to be a little bit off. So where we make comparisons this year, we're using district data from their publicly available websites to the best of our ability. Okay, I know that's a pain in the butt for folks. Right? I get that. This is not done without some trepidation on our part in terms of making the change. But again, in order to align with definitions that are in federal and state law, we wanted to make sure that we were aligned. So that's just a big change that we made. So I wanted to make sure folks. All right. So what are we doing in getting every kid to school? Well, I would be a poor presentation giver if I didn't start with the story, right? So I want to start with the story about Arlington Pre-K to 8, which in 2022 had 74% of the students chronically absent. So in the summer of 2022, we came together with staff, community partners, City of Pittsburgh, local funder, and more, and asked what could we do together to get kids back in school more regularly. And, you know, there were a few things we knew we needed to do. One, there were some basic needs that families needed help meeting, like regular haircuts for kids. So we found a donor to help put together the barbershop that you see here that's now in the community schools office, and the security guard at the school is giving haircuts on a regular basis and mentoring during those times with students, building relationships with them. You know, we knew we needed shoes because fast-growing and hard-playing middle schoolers and elementary schoolers wear them out, and some families don't have money for multiple pairs of shoes in a year, right? So we knew we needed to provide extra to that. More coats, hats, and gloves. Again, you know, I don't know about you, but my child has misplaced their coat so many times, it's maddening. And yet, like, we know when students do that, they may not have a backup, right? So making sure they can get to school meant that they had to have warm clothes, right? So donors from law firms helped us to buy some of these supplies, like I said. Firefighters and churches pitched in and donated other items. We also knew that the sidewalks that the students were walking on needed repairing, right? Because the Safe Walks to School signage that was out there that the city had put together put kids on roads that had no sidewalks. So there were spaces where they had to walk in the street because either cars were parked on them and there was no sidewalk, just gravel. Well, the city heard us, right? And now they founded a pilot. Not only did they repair sidewalks and put new ones in around Arlington, especially on the safe routes to schools, they're doing this in the West End, Hill District, and in Homewood, right? To make sure kids have safe walking areas to school. And then finally, we knew that there was a certain group of students, younger students, but because of the bus driver shortage, and the need to expand the zone by which students walk from a mile to a mile and a half, there were some young students whose parents were saying, I'm not letting my child walk, especially with the conditions of the streets and everything, as a 6 or 7-year-old up to school. Those students were facing severe chronic absence. And so with the Bashir Association, a local community organization in the Hilltop, we helped them find funding to buy 2 vans and support a driver to pick up kids. And what they also did was hire 3 retired nanas who would call parents in the morning and give them a little nudge and help coordinate the van transportation, make sure kids were up and ready to go. And we saw market improvement, right? And so it's a positive story, right? And so what we've seen though in the data is chronic absence is down significantly in 1 year thanks to all this collective work, right? And what this did was also inspire teachers to say, hey, we could do a basketball team here. What would it take to get that started, right? And so staff provided attendance incentives and started looking at the data more deeply. And together we are supporting initiatives like the new basketball team that are helping get kids what they need to want to be there and create an excuse to go to that. Now the resource lift here was significant, but not undoable. And so for us as an organization, we feel like this is a great model for how we can continue to support schools with what we're calling our A to Z fund. In addition to the school-based work, we knew that parents underestimate by half the number of days that their child missed, right? It's something, and I knew I did it. If you're not being told like how many days your child missed, you might think, I missed 5, they might miss 10. Right? Again, too, the messages that we've received over the years has always been about, well, excused absences are fine, unexcused is what we should really be worried about. And yes, please make sure you're calling, excuse those absences that you can, but the reality is any absence means you're just not in class, so you're not learning. And so we partnered with Richard King Mellon Foundation, Pittsburgh Public Schools and Everyday Labs to bring Everyday Labs and this intervention to Pittsburgh as a pilot. Their program works to solve this problem by using scientifically backed nudges, right? Email, mail, and text nudges that help increase communications with families about the importance of being in school. Where they have worked in past in other districts, they've helped to reduce chronic absence by between 10 and 15%, right? So it's not the whole problem, but it does solve part of it. And I need to thank the folks at the district who helped make this possible. Dr. Netchai, our head of student services, Dr. Dwyer, who helped with the data, and then on the ground, Len Runko and Carrie Witter, student support services for the work they did to help coordinate these letters and text messages. We're into the 2nd year now, and now counselors and social workers are getting professional development on how to use this data to make decisions in terms of their multi-tiered systems of support to support students. And as a result of their efforts, we saw over 18,000 students and families, chronically absent or absent students receive an intervention, over 172,000 communications. And for those that received the intervention, 58% of those students improved their chronic absence status, right? So whether they went from either severely chronic absent or extremely chronic absent to severely chronic absence, but we're starting to see improvement. And again, for us, the goal, yes, the ultimate goal is getting to that place where 0 are chronically absent, but we can improve and reduce the number of days that students are missing. We know that that's going to help their learning, even if it's not meeting our full benchmark of not being chronically absent. Again, overall, then over 1,500 more kids attended school regularly in 22-23, and that just means that we have more students who are able to be there to learn. We invest so much in our public education system here in Pittsburgh for good reason, but our students and families can't take advantage of that if they're not there. So we're really proud of this fact. Now, I don't want to bum you out, but there's still lots of work to do, right? There were 17 schools where 40% or more students were chronically absent last year, and no PBS school in the 22-23 school year had chronic absence rates of less than 10%. For us, this means there's just an opportunity, right, to continue to try and address these needs. And for us at A+ schools, our hope is over the next 3 to 5 years to really support the schools with the highest rates of chronic absence, to do what we've done at Arlington at a broader scale, right? Bring resources, coordinate planning, and ensure that students have what they need so they can get to school, whether it be on the community side, something that needs to happen, or working with the school to do something, right? The other thing we know is that these problems are clustered across feeder patterns that feed into our neighborhood high schools that serve high concentration of students facing economic disadvantages, right? So if you look at, 16 of the 17 schools all are part of these different colored feeder patterns, whether they feed into Carrick, Brashear, Perry, Westinghouse, or Reliance, right? And so one of the things we can really do is think about how do we work with community organizations in those communities. We're already working closely on the north side, we're working in the hilltop with Arlington, but how do we support these other communities and folks who are already on the ground, right? A+ schools doesn't have to lead, but we can be there to provide support, catalyze what we've learned, and help other organizations to really address this issue across our communities. We know that the economic disadvantages that students face have a big impact on who is chronically absent. Students facing poverty challenges, or have challenges in getting to school, from lack of childcare and transportation to higher rates of asthma and untreated health conditions to less safe streets. Our children and families that are living in communities with economic disadvantage face significant challenges. And these unfair challenges don't impact all children the same. 80% of the children, Black children in Pittsburgh, being considered economically disadvantaged, while only 40% of white students are considered economically disadvantaged, right? And where there are higher concentrations of low-income students, there tends to be higher chronic absence. We sometimes see bright spots, though, that have us asking what's going on there that's bucking the trend, right? At Allegheny 6 to 8, you see Dr. House and her team, while they have 85% of the students are considered economically disadvantaged, only 23% are chronically absent, so the lowest of any in that cohort. So what are they doing there? And what can we do to learn more about the practices there that are getting kids to school? And based on the data, one of the things that we also see is that the large driver of high school chronic absence are students who are missing school at our neighborhood schools, right? Slide 2 slides ago. So when you see these high rates of chronic absence in high school for our students, right? This graph shows you from K to 12, the rates of kids who are missing more than 10% of the days enrolled and then missing more than 20%, right? So high rates of chronic absence, especially in our high schools. In a later section, I'll talk about in this room, the community are doing to engage students in Perry and relevant project-based learning and creating a culture of safety and belonging at the school, and how teachers there have really been leading the charge with this work. So again, we are able to get more kids to school. In the past year, we've gotten more kids to school every day, but we still have more work to do. And here's what we can do to help. Our community can help create safe ways for kids to get to school. We're going to need to continue to work with the city and with our community organizations to make sure that our streets are safe in the morning and the afternoon so the kids can get to school, whether they're walking, on the bus, or on a yellow bus. We also know that there are basic resource needs that kids and families have that go beyond what schools provide. This district does a great job of providing additional resources, right, to students, whether it be a computer, internet resources. But we know for some families that's still not enough, right? And so how can we leverage the partnerships, the education partnership? How can we leverage community organizations to help support basic resource needs when families fall on hard times? Third, we can communicate with families regularly about the importance of not missing more than 10 days of school for any reason. You all are now evangelists in this ministry of getting our kids to school. And if you can tell folks that in your communities that missing 10 days for any reason puts your child, more than 10 days, puts your child at greater risk of school failure, my hope is that more kids will show up every day, because now we have more information to families about the number of days of this. The other thing we can do is to celebrate every child when they improve, right? So no matter what, no matter whether the child continues to be chronically absent or not, we need to be celebrating those improvements, and schools and community organizations can be a big part of it. Okay. So getting every kid to school ready to learn. And what do we mean by this, right? So the way I think about this is kind of a couple of different ways. One is, how do the students know the concepts and facts that are necessary to learn what they're supposed to learn in the grade that they're in, right? So COVID put a big impact on that, right? We lost a lot of learning time. So are you able to do what you're supposed to do in the classroom that you have right now based on what we expect for you to do based on your age and grade level? Do you have what you need to be successful, right? So again, it's coming back to like basic learning supplies, pens, paper, pencils, paper, computer. And do you have those things that you need to be able to do the project to get things done? And finally, can you get help if you haven't learned if you haven't mastered concepts? Is there tutoring available? Is there homework help, additional classroom support, out of school time? Are those things available to you? So we're going to analyze this as best we can. We know we have gaps in our knowledge. But to Sarah's point, this year as part of our Rising Up series, we took a real deep look at Greenfield pre-K to 8 because we know literacy is so important to not only future child success, but we know kids who are reading at grade level are also more likely to show up to school, right? So it's sort of the chicken and egg problem. You have to be there to learn to read, but if you're not there to learn to read, you're more likely not to show up, right? Because you're not feeling it because you don't know what's going on. Greenfield has been, we noticed over the years, has been getting a much higher percentage of their students ready to learn when it comes to literacy. So what did we learn? Well, in 2023, 70% of Greenfield's 3rd to 5th graders were reading proficiently. Like last year, more kids are reading proficiently by 3rd grade in Greenfield, 89%, than were before the pandemic, which was 86%. That's the highest rate of reading proficiency for 3rd graders in the district, and the only school close to our goal of getting 95% of kids reading proficient by 3rd grade. That's our goal, not the district's. But what's the secret to their success, right? So it's not just one thing, it's lots of things, right? For one, nearly half, 46% of their students are facing some form of economic disadvantage. More than half are not, right? Which means families are able to bring more resources to their students and supplement learning. But there are schools with much lower rates, concentrations of students of economic disadvantage, that are not getting the results that Greenfield is getting, right? So it must be something in addition to that. As Faith Shines, our editor, discovered, the entire teaching staff at Greenfield is dedicating to cultivating student identity as readers. They know their kids really well, as Mrs. King's quote here shows. The 4th grade ELA teacher makes sure that she knows the families, siblings, interests, and take time to get to know each of them on a personal level, and then suggest books for summertime and pleasure reading based on what she knows about the kids. You know, as a result, we interviewed one family where the child basically said, is there any time you don't want to come to school? She said, no, I always want to be here, right? They have high expectations too, as you can see from the sample of the student work, around what children can do, right? This is what we want. We want our children not only to be loved and cared for, but also to be expected to do work at a high level. And Greenfield teachers are doing that as a team, right? Because it's not just that the 4th grade teacher is asking about the student's identity as a reader, but their former teacher, the 3rd grade teacher, is interested as well, and the 5th grade teacher is interested as well. We would encourage teachers, principals in the district to take a deeper look at Greenfield and have the team there share out with their colleagues of the how of what they do every day to get many kids to read. All right? Now, here's what we know from the community side that we can be doing, right? The district has invested in tutor.com to be able to get kids homework help. I know my child's computer has a big thing saying need homework help. Go to tutor.com, right? So every time our children are opening up their computer for schoolwork, they're being reminded that that's a resource that's available for them, right? That's great. There are also tutoring programs through Gwen's Girls, through the Bible Center, church, right? In local communities, Asset STEM, right? That are providing tutoring to ensure that kids after school have access to support and homework help. There's homework help in nearly every Carnegie Library branch every day. And so if students are feeling like they can't get it done, we'd encourage families to say, go ahead, go down the street to the branch library. And we have a great story about what the Hill District Branch Library is doing with youth and young people to support their learning. And finally, again, we talked about the education partnership and what they're doing, but really, we know if you don't have what you need to learn, you can get frustrated and not do it. So we want to make sure that we remove that barrier for families. The other thing, though, that again, it's like the chicken and egg thing. The other thing that we see in Greenfield and overall is that the more kids are in school regularly, the more they are proficient at reading. Greenfield has a lower chronic absence rate. They were sort of one of the lower. Only Colfax as a K-8 had lower last year at 16% of their students being chronically absent. And as you can see from the graphs above, the trend, right? It's not correlation, but there is a trend here where what you see is with schools with lower chronic absence, whether they be K-5 or K-8 schools, the percentage of students reading proficiently as measured by the PSSA goes down, the more chronic absence goes up. Being in school really matters if you want kids to be able to read. And if take an even broader view, we see that district-wide, post-pandemic, overall schools are getting more students to read than they were in those years just after the pandemic. A good trend, right? But the way we typically look at this data might be hindering our ability to know what's actually going on and supporting the cohorts of students. So we decided this year, because you're seeing this, I think this is probably, if you're really paying attention to student academic data, you may have seen school data 3 or 4 times already this year. Again, maybe it's just me. I look at this stuff all the time. So we decided as a team what it would look like if we could look at the cohorts of students. And again, we know that there's changes to those cohorts over time. But one of the things we wanted to see is, okay, if we looked at the 3rd graders and over time, what happened to their test scores, we follow them all the way through. Well, you actually see growth for those that were 3rd grade in 22, 21, and 20, right? Growth in terms of percentage point growth, small but mighty. You also see after COVID, while there were declines, some return to growth. Again, worth for us to take a look at. One of the things that though we are concerned about is the decline that we see in student test scores. Now, in the higher grades, we want to make sure that the kids that, because they missed some learning time during the pandemic, how do we make sure that there's supports, right? And again, this is part of why we look at this data this way. It's like, if we're going to rally the community to support kids and families, then we need to know who the children are and how we can support them, right? So we need to know the scope of the challenge and what we can do to get them the support they need. Again, math achievement is something that continues to lag behind reading achievement in the district. Like reading achievement, though, schools with lower rates of chronic absence generally, not all the way across, but generally have higher rates of math achievement. Again, Greenfield is doing something here with 97% of their 3rd graders in 2023 scoring proficient or advanced in math. Overall, grade by grade, again, there are improvements over the past couple of years in math outcomes, but getting to transformational results where 80 to 90% of our students have the skills to improve will require our community to rethink our system of schools so we can provide the opportunities and support our kids need. I'll speak more to this in the next section. Again, we're looking at cohorts of kids to see what we might be able to do as a community to support them. School by school, nearly all our older students will need help in math if we're going to be able to prepare them to graduate for college or career ready. Again, when you look at the math outcomes, we've always seen a decline in math outcomes in our middle grade years. Known that those declines seem to be steeper when compared to prior years, based on what we're seeing in the data, but lots of work to do here on math. And I know part of the story that we tell in the Rising Up section about algebra readiness and algebra taking by 8th grade, Dr. Holtz-Pearson really wanted to make sure that the community knows, sharing it with you now, that there's a real focus in the district on K-2 math outcomes as well, and thinking about how math instruction and sort of the curriculum around math can be improved so the students have what they need. Okay, so our schools and community can help get every kid to school ready to learn, right? Schools can provide, like Greenfield did, rigorous instruction centered on strong relationships with students and families. Families can help support learning by creating spaces and routine for study and by accessing the resources that are in our community. Community organizations can help make sure students and families have the tools and resources they need to learn, like school supplies, internet access, devices. And all of us can celebrate our children and build a culture where children identify as strong readers, critical math thinkers, artists, and scientists. Again, let's celebrate our children and their academic success. And when we do that, we create that identity, we know that they're going to be successful in school. We're almost to the great. Getting every kid to school where they want to be and feel they belong. So what do we mean by this? Well, these are schools that are meeting both the social, emotional, and academic needs of children. They're schools that offer rich opportunities where students are challenged. So how do we measure if schools are doing this? Well, first, we take a look at enrollment, right? Just sort of as basics, if kids want to be there, or families want to be there, we look at enrollment, right? And we know that birth decline, housing availability, are huge factors in this story as well, right? But we also know that COVID had an impact on who was in our schools and who left our communities. When we look at enrollment, we see that the two schools that had enrollment increases since the 2017-18 school year are schools that offer STEAM magnet programs, one full and one partial, SciTech and Schiller. Overall, the schools with the largest enrollment declines tend to be our high schools, right? They also have the largest enrollments. But we did see large declines for the past 6 years in those enrollments. Next, we look at neighborhood school assignment with an eye towards understanding if students and families are choosing school based on their proximity to home. Only 5 out of the 39 neighborhood schools have capture rates, which is the number of kids who are assigned to the school that attend, that exceeded 50%. Say it said another way, there's only 5 schools where more than half of the kids in the neighborhood chose their neighborhood school. So while proximity may certainly be a factor in school decision, families are demonstrating a willingness to choose a magnet or charter more often than the school down the street. With over 14,000 students choosing magnets or charters in the city, as compared to over 9,000, a little over 9,000 who are choosing their neighborhood school. The thing is, what might be driving this decision is that our neighborhood schools, unfortunately, and there's no fault here, but this is the truth. Our neighborhood schools reinforce patterns of residential segregation and community disinvestment. The same red lines that limited housing, lending to Black residents in certain areas, the same disinvestment in resources like public transit, doctors' offices, and other community necessities are the same lines upon which our schools are. This leads to nearly 40% of Black students being in buildings where the concentration of students in poverty is 80% or greater, while only 40% of white PPS students are in buildings where that number is 50% or less. Right? The issues compound in buildings where we concentrate poverty. Additionally, the students in schools with higher concentrations of poverty don't necessarily get more resources. In many cases, they get less. For example, based on the latest data from the state's Every Student Succeeds Act, which is from 2020 and 2021, PBS spent $7,000 more per pupil at Whittier than it did at Faison, the school in the district with the highest concentration of low-income students. Whittier is 66% economically disadvantaged, 55% white, and 25% Black. Faison is 90% economically disadvantaged, 94% Black, and 1% white. If we're going to give students fair and equal access to opportunities, supports, and resources, we're going to need to redesign the system so that students at places like Faison can get more. Again, without the leadership from the board and a willingness of this community to say that we need to make some significant change, it's not going to happen. These issues, when you take them all together, impact teacher attendance, which again impacts student attendance, right? If the teacher doesn't want to be in the building, you can bet that students don't either, right? So we looked at, we see that schools with higher concentrations of students in poverty generally have higher rates of teacher chronic absence, though not in all cases. This leads to schools where teachers are more likely to call off, and where teachers call off, like I said, students are more likely to call off as well. On this graph, we see that average chronic teacher absence the average student chronic absence increases as teacher chronic absence increases. One surprising note in the data is that half of the schools with the highest rates, so 20% or more chronic absence, are magnets. And so one of the things that has us wondering is, does teacher professional development in those specialized schools create more opportunities for teachers to have to leave to get that professional development during the school year? Something to look at, not something we know for sure, but it was a wondering that we had in the data. And student concentration of poverty also leads to higher rates of student suspensions. 9 out of the 10 schools with the highest rates of suspensions had concentrations of economically disadvantaged students of 75% or greater. And so what you see in this slide is that stat, and then that's coupled with, a different set of data, is because of how we concentrate students living in poverty by race. These 10 schools are also more likely to be predominantly Black, contributing to higher rates of Black student push-out. Right? Again, if we want to get to equity, we have to look at the structures by which we puts kids into school and which schools they're going to. And again, this is not an easy conversation because it probably requires reconfiguring the schools and the way in which we assign kids. Not an easy conversation to have, and not one I am jealous Dr. Walters to have to me. The other thing is student behavior may be linked to the lack of opportunities provided. As school enrollments decline, schools can't offer as many opportunities. We were able to speak as part of our Rising Up section with Mr. Rogalski, a math teacher at Sunnyside, about how he had worked so hard over the years to get as many 8th graders as he could taking algebra by 8th grade at Sunnyside. But as their enrollment has declined, it's become hard to be able to offer it every year if not enough students are ready. Again, he makes the point, if we push kids into classes that they're not ready for, we may actually turn them off to the subject, right? So it's finding that right, probably is that proximal zone of development, that right moment where students are ready for the challenge. Across the district, this means that in the K-8s that have higher enrollments, Black students, we see no offering of algebra for those students. Well, what this makes us ask is, does the K-8 configuration continue to be an equitable school configuration? Do the supposed benefits of social emotional connections outweigh the lost opportunity for students in those schools who could take algebra, right? There are students who are ready in every one of those buildings with the light blue line that's not where the schools are not being offered, where algebra is not being offered, but they're unable merely because the number of 8th graders in the school. Now, the district does offer some opportunities for students to be able to take algebra either in high school or through another means, but scheduling and logistics makes that almost impossible for nearly every student, right? Because you have the school schedule you have the classes you have, so it becomes harder to offer. We also see that smaller high schools under our current configurations are unable to offer AP courses, which also impacts the number of students that are able to take them. One of the things that we see as a bright spot is the partnership between PBS and the University of Pittsburgh through the Justice Scholars Institute, which is providing 7 unique college and high school courses at Pittsburgh Westinghouse, Malliance, and Perry High School, providing access to college credit earning courses and rigor for a total of 83 students, right? So it's 83 students, but these are schools where there are, as you can see from this chart, fewer AP offerings, right? So critically important program that's making the school place for kids that are ready to take on those challenges be there. And, right, so I've been talking about opportunities, and while opportunities are a critical part of why students come to school, their social and emotional safety and well-being is also critical. So in our Rising Up section, we interviewed the school counselor, Mrs. Kyle at Pittsburgh Southbrook, about how she, the school's principal, Ms. McNamara, are using data from the district's panorama survey and interactions with students and families to address needs and meet the kids where they are. Their efforts to attend to those relationships led to a 19% reduction in chronic absence in the school. And you should read the story in the Rising Up section because it talks very deeply about how Ms. Heil is making the efforts to really connect with families and students around their behavior. The other thing is, at Perry High School, A+ schools, One North Side, and a variety, and the Buell Foundation, Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, the district, Schools That Can, we have so many wonderful partners are working together to create and provide additional enrichment and planning within the school. For the past 5 years, we've been working with teachers at the school to co-design a plan for improvement at Perry High School, and this teacher-led plan is making a huge difference for kids in that school. We see now that the safety pilot that we started there is now being called Safe Passages, is rolling out across the city. Really want to thank Michelle Porter at One North Side, who helped really spearhead that work in its initial years. But we're able to make sure that we have student leaders who are helping, who are learning about violence and reducing it within schools, in partnership with the city now, and an initiative that the district and city are undertaking in more schools. So we know that culture change coupled with opportunities is going to make a huge difference. And just want to report in the first quarter of this school year, so the 23-24 school year, we're able to undertake 32 different projects with community-based partners from the Manchester Craftsman's Guild, Science Center, Moonshot Museum, and others, and 3 field trips, right? So really bringing community resources into the school and helping to support the teachers in that school with planning and project-based learning. So we're excited about this partnership. We want to continue it and want to see if we can help expand it in other places, right? So getting every kid a school where they want to be and feel they belong is going to require our school board, administration, and community to come together on a few things. One, we know schools can focus on the social emotional data that they have to connect with kids and families like they did in Southfield. How can we make sure that that lesson is being learned across the district? 2, the administration and board can look at how current school assignments and funding policies concentrate students with economic disadvantages in certain buildings and provide less opportunities due to lower enrollments. And then 3, the community can support transformational change by working with the board and administration to support a vision of diverse by design schools. Right, we have to erase these red lines and get students attending schools, whether they be close or not, where there's greater diversity, and we know that this will help bring more teachers together and help students succeed. I've said this before and I'll say it again. We have everything we need in the city to succeed by our children. We need to put it to work for them. We as a community have committed to paying our teachers well with a median salary of nearly $100,000, which is leading to some of the lowest teacher turnover in the country. We know we have solid funding with over $30,000 per pupil in spending in 21-22. We have low student-teacher ratios with 1 teacher for every 11 students and abundant community supports, with Pittsburgh being 4th per capita in philanthropic giving in the United States. We have community partners like the Carnegie Library that have children's items, not just books, that can help enrich learning and vast public support for making sure our kids thrive. So with all that said, I want to ask, are you all in on making sure we get every kid to every school every day? All right, I see some nods of heads. I'm going to hope that there's some nodding of heads online as well. With that, I would like to welcome Dr. Wayne Walters, Superintendent of our Pittsburgh Public Schools, for his reflections on the data here and on a busy day with board reorganization. I really appreciate him being here. And then after that, William Hileman from the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, I'd like you to come up and share your thoughts as well. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here again. I am Dr. Wayne Walters, proud superintendent of the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And I'm happy to be here to share reflections at the 2023 report to the community on public school progress in Pittsburgh. And first want to celebrate the promotion of our student artists in the program. That brought me a lot of joy to see them on the cover, in the back, because I'm just elated when I say anything about my students. In collaboration with our board of directors, I've identified 5 priority goals for improving culture, systems, and instruction in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. The first is around the quality of instruction, is to invest in culturally responsive, evidence-based training tools and resources. The second spans the gamut of a variety of issues with constructing safety, health, and wellness protocols, because we are certainly not in recovery post-pandemic. The third is around building trust and expanding stakeholder communication and partnerships and understanding that we cannot do this work alone. The fourth is the idea of designing effective organizational systems. And so we may have a lot of systems, but we question at times whether they're effective. And so the idea of having effective organizational systems advances the organization and the service that we deliver. And the last is probably the heaviest lift, is to strategically allocate resources to ensure equity, excellence, and efficiency in times where the haves and have-nots become so pronounced. And they become more pronounced in the way that we deliver education for our children. Since 2004, A+ Schools has provided the Pittsburgh community with a snapshot of public school performance. While this information is essential and holds us accountable for student progress, I want to praise A+ schools for moving beyond problem identification to partnering with our schools and the district to support and implement strategies to meet the needs of our students and families. In other words, alone, we may identify problems. Together, through the power of partnerships, we transcend mere identification and embark on the transformative journey of turning challenges into opportunities, aspirations into shared achievements, and problem solving and continuous improvement as core drivers of purpose. At the school level, A+ Schools partners with Pittsburgh Perry, engaging with staff, students, and community to support a vision of positive teaching and learning in that community. And the positive energy must be infectious, as evidenced by Perry's increase in student enrollment. Footnote, increase in student enrollment at Perry. At the district level, as was mentioned previously, a partnership with Everyday Labs, sponsored by A+ Schools, is reaching our families, educating them about the significant impact of student absences, and in turn, improving student attendance. We all know that our work to improve student outcomes will not matter if students are not in school. And I want to uplift James Fogarty and A+ Schools for your continued advocacy, partnership, and support. And thank you for also compiling this year's report and going beyond the numbers and calling out bright spots, such as Pittsburgh Greenfield and the work of teachers like Sherry King to support young readers, the efforts of schools such as Pittsburgh Sunnyside, and a teacher like Eric Rogalski for providing 8th grade students access to algebra, and the work of counselors such as Dr. Nina Heisel to support the social and emotional health of our students. And no offense to our media partners who may out there viewing, but these stories go in depth in a way that we know they are often unable to do. And I must also uplift the work of Faith Shantz, a former parent from a few years ago at Frick International Studies Academy, for the stellar job she has done over the years with illustrating these stories and bringing them to life. While we have seen gains in many areas, we know there's still much work to do to improve the outcomes and experiences of our students. What we can take from this report is that there's so much we can do together in partnership and alignment with the vision for our children and their future. This Wednesday, we will update the board on our strategic planning process as part of its education committee meeting. And this update will include a review of district data and community input that has informed the development of a draft strategic plan framework. We will need to hear the voices of the entire community on our draft framework as we want to get it right. And more importantly, we know that we cannot do it without you. So again, thank you to A+ Schools for your uplifting vibes, optimistic spirit, continued partnership, and alignment to our mission of being students first always in all ways. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Billy Hileman. I'm Vice President for the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers for about a week. And so I want to first, offer. You're more familiar with Dina at these meetings, and she does a great job at them. I've been to a few of them, and so I'm glad that I'm vice president right now, because what you're about to hear is on the shoulders of the president. But nonetheless, greetings on behalf of Nina and the 2,800 employees of the Pittsburgh Public Schools that the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers proudly represents. They do great work every day. You've heard about some of it. I do want to also say that I was told I have approximately 10 minutes, and I promise not to trespass on the time beyond that. I am used to the buzzer at those harsh public hearings, where the microphone suddenly goes off at about, I think, 2 minutes and 45 seconds. But nevertheless, I'll do what I can to share my reflections in that amount of time. I did read most of the report. I got a link to it. It was embargoed. I respected the embargo. I did hear some notes, received some today in the mail. So that's good. Good timing on your mailing. But I haven't done all my margin notes. I have a few things that I do want to question in the report, but most of all, I want to say how much I appreciate, in particular, the 3 things that are highlighted at the beginning that Mr. Fogarty went through. The support to support communities to be places where students are able to get to school safely every day, get families and students the necessary resources so students show up ready to learn, and make schools places where students and staff feel they belong and are excited to be every day. And I don't mind repeating those because they're wonderfully phrased and they are so true. And I think that they really align with the district's mission, as well as the PFT's call for community schools. And I think that we have lots of things that we haven't fully accessed yet. I very much appreciate, or even reflect on what Dr. Walters said a few minutes ago. I think the 5 things that he identified are spot on too, including number 3, the item about trust and doing this together. And at the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, although we haven't always been in a love affair with A+ schools, we are, and they have, I would say, moved closer to us recently. So we think, and us to them too. I'm not going to be totally humorous about this. It is serious, and I think that we have to work together in order to solve the problems that are facing the city and the families. And I do believe that these things, these 3 items, as well as items 3 and 4, the systems, as well as item 5 that Dr. Walters said, the equitably deploying the resources. They are also the right things, and the combinations of those are the right things. The PFT wants to be a partner in that. We think we have a lot to offer in that regard through the fact that we've been deeply involved in this work at a close level for decades. And there has been historically for nearly half a century a partnership between the Federation and the district regarding shared decision making, leadership development in our schools, and bringing educators forward as leaders so that they're doing the right things for kids. We want to continue that. It does need to expand. It hasn't been, if you look back, I think half a century in the years that lead up to today, not always been a whole community endeavor, and that does need to, is changing, partly attributable to A+ schools and other entities, but that is changing, and it needs to, in order for our students to get what they need. I was going to go through the wonderful things that Sharon King and Mr. Rogalski and Nina Hessel, is that what you say? I don't want to say it wrong. Nina over at Southbrook. Also want to say that but I won't repeat those things because Dr. Walters said it so wonderfully, but also the Hill District branch of the Carnegie Library that's in the report. That is a wonderful story too. Read that. I think and there's that movie about the EMTs and what the folks in the Hill District did for emergency medical services, ambulance services, for all human beings at that time. And that story, it's told in the report as an adult workshop at the Carnegie Library, but it could be part of our story in our CTE programs, and those are the types of things that should be part of our schools. There is one part of the report. Now I'm going to get a little grumpy though. There is one part of the report that got my attention, and that was the statistic of 355 teachers that look like teaching out of certification in our schools. And I think that we have to check those data on that and see exactly what that means, because I don't think that that's true. I do know that the number eight of the teachers that have an emergency certificate are teachers who were asked to teach another course, had a content area, but might not have had the grade level, got an emergency certificate because of the difficulties in master scheduling in small schools. But that's 8 people. The 355, I'm not so sure what that is, but let's together look at that, find out what that is, because it's out there now. And there's also the comment about this affecting students of color and economically disadvantaged students in economically disadvantaged situations more significantly. But the other thing that was in the report, and I think that we need to, I don't know how close I am to trespassing on 10 minutes. Somebody wave a sign when I get close, because I don't want to do that. But the last part I will talk about, this report does talk about race. And it is a message about race and what we need to do in terms of our conversations about race in many ways, including the statistics that if a Black child has a Black teacher, that 13%, I think it's 13% more likelihood of going to college, and the two, it's 33%, something like that. But it's in the report. Those are very important. Then we look at the number of Black teachers in our schools. And how can we change that? And some of that is outside of our control. But as I said that, I want to also say, let's not let it be outside of control. Let's make Pittsburgh Public Schools the place where students of color want to come to work and be a part of a mission of serving all children in Pittsburgh Public Schools. We have very dire statistics in the state of Pennsylvania. In the last decade, 15,000 in teacher preparation programs. Now we're down to around 5,000 people graduating. The number of students of color, 1,800, now down to 800. And when you look at the question on SATs, what field you want to go into, the students taking the SAT are answering, only 4% are saying they'll go into education that used to be 11%. So there is something that is going on in those statistics that we need to address. But with the same mindset of community schools working together, building trust and creating systems that work, we have to address that too. And because we're not going to change it just with the Brashear Teacher Academy or parent to teacher programs. They'll do something, but we won't do it we have to change the way the environment is, not only in our state, but across the country, so that students of color choose teaching. There is no more noble profession. And that includes all the people who aren't classroom teachers who work in the Pittsburgh Public Schools and their dedication to seeing that our students are safe every day. Community schools are part of it, but we have to have a community school mindset with the city, with the district, with the people who represent the employees, and most of all with the families who trust Pittsburgh Public Schools to send their children to. And my mom would kill me for any sense. Thank you very much.
both, really appreciate it. Just to note, really, the data that we talked about for out of cert teachers comes from the state's ESSA website, so the federal reporting site for every student succeeds act. So it may be, to your point, it may be wrong, but it is what, yeah. So that's, well, then let's go to the PDE and make sure we get that changed, because that's where we pulled that from. All right, so what can you do next? If you want to get more information, one, if you are a parent of a Pittsburgh Public School student, you are likely to get this book in your mail. So you don't need to go online, but if you're not, you can go online to ourschoolspittsburgh.org and access the report. It will be, thank you, it is live now on the web. You know, you may be asking, how can I share this information with my community? Well, we are happy to come and schedule a presentation with your community and really highlight schools in your neighborhoods that you think you'd like to learn more about. We are happy to do that. We do that often. Nicole Sims on our team does a great job linking it as a parent leader to what she needs to know as a parent. So we'd be happy to do it. I do some of the presentations, some of the rest of this team does as well. How can you get more involved if you're an organization that really cares about doing this work? Well, the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative, a collaborative that began during the pandemic, that we continue to meet and think about these issues, meets every 2 months. You can join, become a member, join our meetings. There'll be a summit in April, and there's a meeting. We just had a lunch and learn. And yeah, there's a meeting coming up in February. So please do join us in the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative. It's a place where we share information, learn from each other, and think about how across these different issues, whether they be health, housing, or education, or out of school time, how we can work together to solve the problems that are keeping our kids from school. The final thing you can do is really, again, be an evangelist on this message, sharing your excuse to go to school. You can go to any of our social media sites, share your own excuse to go to school. We know that our students, when they're communicated with about why they should go, more and more are going every day. So again, we thank you for the time. I want to also note that this report lives on for a year, and so next year will be our 20th year as an organization. So we're going to continue to evolve and think about it. So if folks here in this audience or online have ideas of stories around things that have happened in the last 20 years that you want to share, feel free. We are open to ideas, and we'll be thinking about that in the coming year. With that, I want to just say thank you so much. For those that have questions, I'll be happy to take them after I'm here. But just really appreciate all of you for being here today. For those online, thank you for joining us online. And yeah, we will get in touch. This whole presentation will be posted online onto our Facebook and other social media accounts. Give us a day. It usually takes a little while for us to run through that, but we do appreciate you for being here. And yeah, let's help make sure we get every kid in every school every day. Thanks, people.